What if the real power in the world didn't lie in governments, or in presidents or prime ministers, but in a handful of families whose fortunes quietly shaped finance, politics, and industry across centuries, influencing wars, controlling credit, and rewriting the rules of capitalism? Today we're going to pull back the curtain and trace the hidden story of the most powerful money families. By the end, you'll see how some of their tactics still echo through our world, and how the same patterns that built them could be building new ones. So here's the mystery. How did a few families, born in relative obscurity, come to wield influence that rivaled kingdoms? And how did that power eventually crack, falter, or transform? If wealth is just money on paper, what happens when that paper writes the rules for the world? Let's begin. 1. Setting the stage, finance, family, and influence. To understand the story, we must go back, not just to modern banking, but to the early genesis of credit, commerce, and dynastic wealth. Families that mastered money learned early: lending, exchange, trade. And in doing so, they became entangled with politics and power. Take, for example, the family business of the Bardi family in 14th century Florence. They lent vast sums to kings of England, only to be crushed when a king defaulted. This moment, a loan gone bad, reveals how financial power and political risk were intertwined from early on. Later, the rise of formal banking, the expansion of trade, the demands of war financing. All these created opportunities for families willing to act not just as merchants, but as lenders, credit makers, and institutional power brokers. By the 18th or 19th century, banks were not just banks, they were central to empires. The Rothschild family, for example, built a network of branches across Europe, financing governments, armies, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, in America, families like the Rockefeller family and the Morgan family consolidated industries and reshaped the rules of business. Now, I'll warn you, what you thought you knew about rich families is only half the story. The twists lie ahead. When power hits its breaking points, when fortunes fracture, when modern parallels emerge. Let's trace one thread. In the late 1700s, Meyer Amschel Rothschild began in Frankfurt, Germany, in the Jewish quarters, engaged in coin sorting and currency exchange. Building a reputation, he trained his children and placed his 5 sons in major European cities: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, Frankfurt. This network let the family transfer credit across borders in times of war and disruption. Why this matters? At the time, money moved slowly. War disrupted transport. National debts piled up. A family which could coordinate across nations had an extraordinary advantage. So the Rothschilds become not just bankers, but international financiers of governments. At roughly the same time, in Japan, the Mitsui family were transforming from merchants and pawnbrokers into what would become a zaibatsu, a massive conglomerate spanning banking, trading, shipping. Their story reminds us this isn't purely Western. Financial dynasties occurred elsewhere, with different cultural and political settings. So the origin story: merchant capital plus specialization in credit plus political connections, seed of dynastic wealth. The families who figured that out early gained a structural advantage. Once these families achieved initial success, the next phase was consolidation and expansion. For the Rothschilds, the Napoleonic Wars offered a massive opportunity. They set up fast courier systems, credit transfers, lending to governments desperate to fund armies. Their cross-border reach meant they were more nimble than many national banks. In the United States, the Morgan family, led by J.P. Morgan, moved beyond banking into industrial consolidation. With enormous influence, Morgan intervened during the Panic of 1907, effectively acting as a de facto central bank for the U.S. before the formal establishment of the Federal Reserve. When banks were failing, Morgan's syndicates stepped in, restructuring railroads, steel, utilities. That kind of power is extraordinary. The Rockefeller family, through the Standard Oil empire founded by John D. Rockefeller, leveraged oil, kerosene, and then refined and distributed business to create massive wealth. And with that came influence in infrastructure, finance, philanthropy, even diplomacy. What pattern emerges? Financial mastery, plus industrial dominance, vertical integration. They control different parts of the value chain. Political and social influence, not just economic power. Families acting like mini-states within states. At the height of their power, these families were behind major infrastructure, railroads, telegraph, oil pipelines, national finance, government bonds, central banking, even cultural institutions, universities, foundations. Their influence reached far beyond mere business. But no dynasty remains unchallenged. With great power come vulnerabilities. Let's look at the cracks. For the bankers of the Middle Ages, the Bardi and Peruzzi families illustrate a key point. When a sovereign defaults, even immense credit power can collapse. The Bardi family lent Edward III of England 900,000 gold florins, and when he defaulted, their banking house collapsed. That's instructive. Sovereign debt risk, political risk, money are intertwined. In more modern times, the Rockefeller Empire was under political and legal pressure. In 1911, Standard Oil was broken up by the U.S. Supreme Court under antitrust laws. That required both the family and their business empire to adapt. Meanwhile, internal family tensions, philanthropic versus business objectives, and generational shifts challenged unity. The Rothschilds faced nationalism, war, expropriation, changing financial landscapes. After WO2s, many national governments took control of banks or imposed regulations that changed how wealth could be maintained. Indeed, one article described how the family had to rebuild in the 1980s after the French bank was nationalized. Also, generational dilution of wealth matters. As fortunes pass to descendants, the unity of purpose erodes. Families that once had a tight command structure now become more diffuse. Public scrutiny increases. Regulation tightens. In short, expansion breeds complexity. Power breeds opposition. Dynastic wealth must adapt or falter. Once the breaking point is reached, what happens? Some families adapt, some decline, some reinvent. But the fallout often has broader consequences. Take the American old money families. An article observed that while families like the Rockefellers and DuPonts continue to have immense wealth, many others lost fortunes or fragmented. The failure to adapt to modern corporate governance, inheritance taxes, regulatory changes, globalization meant that some dynasties couldn't sustain their momentum. In Europe, banking and finance changed dramatically in the 20th century. Nationalization, regulatory oversight, and wars wiped out or severely diminished many once dominant families. The Bardi story is an early precursor, but the 20th century multiplied the risks. World wars, totalitarian regimes, mass tax regimes, divorce, dissipated holdings. Fix attempts. Some families focused on philanthropy, diversification, shifting from singular companies to investment holdings. Others tried to use trust structures, offshore vehicles, secrecy. But even so, the structure of capitalism changed. Publicly listed companies, institutional investors, hedge funds, all shifted the balance away from family control. One example, the modern list of the richest families shows many oil-linked dynasties, Middle East, and retail heirs, e.g. the Walton family in the US, rather than the old merchant banking families. So the lesson, the changes in the system can outpace the power of families unless they reinvent. The failed fixes often lay in trying to preserve legacy rather than adapt to new forms of power. Now, here's where it becomes extremely relevant for us today. The same patterns that built dynastic wealth centuries ago are visible now, just with new faces, new sectors, new geographies. First, globalization and financial integration. The Rothschilds thrived on cross-border networks in the 19th century. Today's mega-wealthy families or entities operate across nations, currencies, Regulatory regimes. They invest in tech, real estate, private equity. The ability to move capital across borders remains a key lever. Second, control of infrastructure plus information. The Morgan and Rockefeller families controlled railroads, oil pipelines, banks. Today's analogous realms might be data platforms, global supply chains, digital infrastructure. The question is, who builds the frameworks that others must use? Third, regulation, disruption, crisis. The old families collapsed or adapted when the system changed. War, nationalization, antitrust. Today we see new potential breaking points: tech regulation, climate risk, geopolitical fragmentation, stagflation. Families that are heavily leveraged or exposed may face new systemic risks. Consider this. As of recent data, some families ranked among the world's richest have net worths in the hundreds of billions. But with wealth comes scrutiny, tax regimes, transparency laws, philanthropic expectations. In many emerging economies, wealth concentration is viewed as a societal risk, prompting reforms. And the repeating pattern is consolidate capital, influence institutions, shift the system, face backlash, adapt, or decline. That's exactly the life cycle we saw historically. Another parallel, many modern money families are no longer purely financial. They are industrial, tech, state-linked, oil and gas. For example, the Saudi royal family or Emirati dynasties which sit on state resource wealth may be equivalent of old banking families, but the model is resource extraction plus state power, rather than merchant banking. Finally, let's look at a subtle but important point: generational transition. In old money families, the third or fourth generation often sees a drop in cohesion or purpose. With modern families, the speed of generational change is faster, wealth moves faster, disruption is faster, so the risk might be higher. As we draw toward the end of this journey, here are 3 clear takeaways. Power isn't just about money. It's about networks and institutions. Those families didn't simply sit on cash. They built banking networks, influenced government borrowing, built infrastructure, and in many cases, shaped policy. If you want to understand the power of money, you must follow the credit, the leverage, the influence. Systems change, and when they do, dynastic advantage can evaporate. Whether it was nationalization, war, regulation, or new technology, the structures that once enabled dynastic wealth can be disrupted. Adaptation is critical. Legacy by itself is no guarantee of permanence. The patterns of the past still inform the present and your future. Whether you're an investor, entrepreneur, or simply a citizen, understanding how wealth and power concentrate helps you understand risk. Systemic risk, regulatory risk, generational risk. The same forces that built the Rothschilds, Morgans, Rockefellers may be operating now in new form. Here's the warning. Just because you see immense wealth and power today doesn't mean you see the full system behind it. As financial and technological infrastructure becomes even more global and opaque, the potential for hidden networks of influence increases. We may be entering a new era of dynastic finance, one where capital flows through digital platforms, jurisdictions shift rapidly, and influence can be exerted via algorithms as much as banks. And here's a question for you to ponder. If a handful of families once organized global credit, who or what is organizing it now? Is it still families, or is it a new class of institutions? And if you don't see the owners, what does that mean for accountability and risk? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of money families, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next video where we'll explore the rise of money in tech, how billionaires are reinventing dynasties. Also leave a comment below, which money family surprised you the most? And what parallels do you see today in the world around you? Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay diligent, and I'll see you in the next one.